At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law handed me a paper plate and pointed to the kids' table as if I had finally become too small to matter. I was 69 years old enough to have buried my husband, raised my son, paid off a mortgage, survived winters that froze the pipes, and still wake up every morning with enough dignity to make my bed before the coffee brewed. But that evening, standing in my son Michael's dining room with a warm pecan pie in my hands, I felt the kind of silence that settles over a woman when she realizes the insult was not an accident. The main table was beautiful. Vanessa had arranged it like something from a holiday magazine, with ivory candles, gold-rimmed china, crystal glasses, folded linen napkins, and little place cards written in her perfect looping handwriting. Michael sat at one end, already carving the turkey. Vanessa floated beside him in a cream sweater dress, smiling at guests as if gratitude itself had chosen her kitchen for the night. There were 12 chairs at that table. I counted them before I looked for my name. I found it across the room, on a small folding table near the bay window, between my 8-year-old granddaughter Grace and my 6-year-old grandson Caleb. My place setting had a red paper plate with a cartoon turkey on it, a plastic fork, and one of those little juice cups with a foil lid. For a moment, I simply stood there. The pie felt heavier in my hands. The smell of roasted turkey, sage stuffing, sweet potatoes, and warm butter filled the room, but all I could hear was the thin crinkle of that paper plate as Caleb pressed his elbow against it. Vanessa noticed me looking. Of course she did. Women like Vanessa never miss the moment their work lands. She came toward me with that soft public smile she wore when other people were watching. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, touching my arm lightly. "I thought you'd be more comfortable over there. It's less formal. And the kids adore you." Her voice was sweet enough to pass for kindness if you weren't the one being cut by it. I looked at Michael, my son, the boy who used to run into my kitchen after school and ask for grilled cheese cut into triangles. The man I had sat beside in emergency rooms, parent-teacher conferences, little league games, and college move-in day. He had hurt her. I knew he had. His carving knife paused for half a second over the turkey breast, then continued. He did not look up. I smiled because grief had taught me that not every wound deserves a witness. "That's thoughtful," I said. My voice came out calm, almost gentle, which seemed to please Vanessa. She turned back to the adults as if she had handled some small household inconvenience. I carried my pie to the buffet, set it between a pumpkin roll and a bowl of cranberry sauce, then walked to the children's table. Grace looked up at me with bright, confused eyes. "Grandma, why are you sitting here?" she asked. Before I could answer, Vanessa called from the dining room. "Because Grandma is helping us keep the kids company tonight." A few adults chuckled, not loudly, just enough to let me know they had accepted the arrangement. I lowered myself into the little chair, careful not to let my knees bump the table. The chair creaked under me. My paper plate bent slightly when I placed my napkin on it. Across the room, glasses clinked. Michael laughed at something his brother-in-law said. Vanessa lifted her wine glass, glowing under the chandelier, seated exactly where she believed the center of the family belonged. I cut Caleb's turkey into small pieces. I helped Grace open her juice cup. I listened to the adults talk about home renovations, holiday plans, and a spring trip to Charleston no one had mentioned to me. Every few minutes, Vanessa looked over, checking to see if I was embarrassed, angry, broken, something she could use later. I gave her nothing. I had learned that from my late husband, Thomas, though he would have hated seeing me there. He used to say, "Eleanor, don't beg for a seat at a table you helped build." I looked down at the paper plate in front of me, at the way gravy had softened one edge until it started to collapse. Then I looked at the china plates on the main table, strong and shining under the warm lights. That was when something inside me became very still. Not numb, not defeated. Still, I understood then that this was not about dinner. This was not about space, or comfort, or children adoring their grandmother. This was Vanessa placing me where she thought I belonged, and Michael allowing it because silence was easier than courage. I had spent 39 years making sure my son never felt small. That Thanksgiving night, he watched his wife make me small in front of everyone, and I let them think I had accepted it. The small table sat close enough to the dining room that I could hear every adult conversation, but far enough away to understand I was not meant to join any of them. Grace leaned against my arm as she tried to balance cranberry sauce on her fork. Caleb was busy building a mountain out of mashed potatoes, whispering to himself, as if the whole meal were a game. I smiled at them because they were innocent, and because children have a way of noticing sadness even when grown people pretend not to. "Grandma, do you want my roll?" Grace asked, sliding it toward me with both hands. "You always give me the bigger one at your house." That nearly broke me more than Vanessa's paper plate had. Not because of the bread, but because my granddaughter understood generosity better than the adults at the main table. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, tearing the roll in half and giving part of it back. Across the room, Vanessa lifted her glass and laughed at something her sister had said. Her laugh was smooth and practiced, never too loud, never too sharp. She had always known how to make cruelty look like manners. "Eleanor has always been wonderful with children," she announced suddenly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Honestly, I think she enjoys the simple table more. The big table can get a little overwhelming at a certain age." A few people smiled without knowing where to put their eyes. Michael kept eating. I watched his shoulders tighten, but he still did not speak. That small tightening told me he knew. He knew the sentence had a blade in it. He knew I had heard it. He knew everyone else had heard it too. And still he chose the safety of his plate. I looked down at my own. The paper had already started to soften where the gravy spread toward the edge. My plastic fork bent. When I tried to cut a piece of turkey, there were extra china plates stacked on the sideboard, maybe 6 or 7 of them, clean and shining beneath the lamp. That was when the last little excuse disappeared. Vanessa had not run out of plates. She had made a choice. I thought back to all the Thanksgiving dinners I had hosted in the old house on Maple Ridge Road, the house Thomas and I bought when Michael was still young enough to sleep with a nightlight. I used to get up before sunrise to season the turkey, polish the silver, bake 2 pies because Michael liked pecan and Thomas loved pumpkin. No one ate from paper unless they were taking leftovers home. Even then, I wrapped the plates carefully so nothing leaked in the car. I had believed those small acts meant something. I had believed family remembered the hands that fed them. But memory is a fragile thing when someone else is teaching people how to forget. Vanessa moved through the room like a hostess in a television commercial, refilling glasses, touching shoulders, asking if anyone needed more stuffing. When she came to our table, she bent down slightly, the way people do when speaking to children or to the very old. "Everything okay over here?" she asked. "Perfectly fine," I said. She glanced at my plate, then at my face. She wanted redness in my cheeks. She wanted a trembling voice. She wanted proof that she had reached me. I gave her a calm smile. "The turkey is very tender." Her eyes narrowed for just a second before the smile returned. "Good." I was worried the grown-up table might be too crowded. "Grown-up table?" Grace looked up at her mother. "But Grandma is a grown-up." The room went quiet in a soft, uncomfortable way. Vanessa's smile stiffened. Michael finally looked over, not at me, but at his daughter. "Grace, eat your dinner," he said. "Not Vanessa, do not say that. Not Mom, come sit with us. Just Grace, eat your dinner." I felt something settle in my chest, heavy but clear. For years, I had excused Michael's silence as stress, marriage, work, the ordinary exhaustion of adult life. But silence is not always empty. Sometimes it is a signature. By the time dessert was served, I had stopped waiting for anyone to correct the insult. I helped Caleb wipe whipped cream from his chin. I praised Grace's drawing of a turkey wearing a pilgrim hat. I took a small slice of my own pecan pie on the same sagging paper plate and ate it slowly while the adults complimented Vanessa's store-bought pumpkin cheesecake. No one mentioned that I had made Michael's favorite pie from scratch, the same recipe his father used to request every November. No one except Grace, who whispered, "Yours tastes like home." I put my hand over hers and kept my eyes on the table until the sting passed. Across the room, Vanessa was watching me again. She looked pleased, almost peaceful, as if the evening had proven something. She thought she had lowered me without a sound. She did not understand that I had heard every word she did not say. After dessert, I carried my paper plate to the kitchen and found the trash can already full of napkins, foil, and half-eaten rolls. I stood there for a moment, looking at that bent little plate in my hand, stained with gravy and pecan filling, and I felt the evening arrange itself in my mind like photographs on a mantel. This was not the first time Vanessa had made me smaller. It was only the first time she had done it with enough confidence to let the whole family watch. The first sign had come 3 months after Thomas passed, when Grace had a school concert and Vanessa told me the wrong starting time. I arrived at 7 o'clock with a small bouquet of daisies. only to find parents already walking out of the auditorium, children carrying paper programs and sleepy smiles. Grace ran to me in the hallway and said, "Grandma, you missed my song." Vanessa had touched my shoulder and sighed as if she felt sorry for me. "Oh, Eleanor, I told you 6:30. Maybe you wrote it down wrong." I had apologized. Imagine that. I had apologized for being left out. Then came Michael's birthday dinner in May. For 39 years, I had baked him a chocolate layer cake with coffee frosting because that was what he asked for when he was 10 and never stopped asking for after that. That year, Vanessa said they were keeping it quiet, just the three of them and the kids. The next morning, I saw pictures online of a long restaurant table filled with cousins, neighbors, Vanessa's parents, and a cake from a bakery with sparklers on top. Michael texted me later, "Sorry, Mom. It came together last minute." Last minute. That phrase became a little broom Vanessa used to sweep me out of rooms I used to prepare. Last Christmas, she told me they were overwhelmed and wanted a peaceful morning alone with the children. I understood. I even left wrapped gifts on their porch before breakfast so Grace and Caleb would have them under the tree. That afternoon, Marjorie called and asked why I had not gone to Michael's open house. I remember standing by my kitchen sink, looking out at the bare maple tree Thomas had planted, while she described cars lining the driveway and people carrying cookie tins through the front door. I told her I must have misunderstood. I said it lightly. I had become very good at making my own exclusion sound harmless. There were smaller things too. Family photos where I stood at the edge and Vanessa cropped me out before posting them. Conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Plans discussed in front of me as if my calendar did not matter. A Mother's Day brunch where my chair was placed at the far end near the swinging kitchen door, so every server bumped the back of it. Each moment had been wrapped in an excuse. Space, timing, stress, miscommunication. But at that kitchen trash can, holding that flimsy plate, the excuses finally fell apart. Vanessa had been training the family to see me as optional. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. She did it gently, socially, with pretty invitations that arrived late and updates that skipped my phone. She did it by making my presence seem difficult, my feelings seem fragile, my traditions seem old-fashioned. And Michael, my Michael, let her. That was the thought I had avoided the longest. It was easier to blame Vanessa entirely. Easier to imagine my son as confused, busy, pulled in too many directions. But a grown man knows when his mother is sitting at a children's table with a paper plate. He knows when his wife calls it comfort, but means humiliation. He knows. I rinsed Grace's plastic cup in the sink because old habits are stubborn. Even insulted, I still cleaned up. Vanessa stepped into the kitchen behind me, carrying a stack of china plates from the main table. Real plates. Heavy plates. Plates that had held the same meal mine had held, without bending under the weight of it. "You do not have to do that," she said. "You are a guest." I turned off the faucet and looked at her. A guest. In my son's house. At my family's holiday. In a life I had helped build with casseroles, tuition checks, sleepless nights, and every quiet sacrifice motherhood requires. "Of course," I said. I would not want to overstep. Her smile flickered because she heard something in my voice she had not put there. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. I dried my hands on a paper towel and walked back toward the dining room. Michael was still seated at the main table, laughing softly with Vanessa's father. For a second, I saw him at 6 years old, asleep on Thomas's shoulder after Thanksgiving dinner, his face sticky with pie. Then the memory faded, and all I saw was a man who had chosen not to look up. The paper plate was in the trash now, but what it proved stayed with me. I did not leave right away. That surprised me more than anything. A younger version of myself might have grabbed her coat, driven home with tears blurring the streetlights, and spent the rest of the night asking what she had done wrong. But age does something strange to pain. It does not make it lighter. It makes it quieter. I stood near the hallway with my purse over my arm and listened while Vanessa moved between the kitchen and dining room, collecting compliments like small trophies. People praised the turkey, the candles, the beautiful table. No one mentioned the little folding table by the window. No one mentioned the paper plate. That was how polite families made cruelty disappear. They stepped around it carefully and called the room peaceful. I was reaching for my scarf when I heard Vanessa's voice drift from the kitchen, lower than before. She was speaking to her mother, Patricia, who had stayed behind to help wrap leftovers. "Michael just needs to stop feeling guilty," Vanessa said. His mother cannot stay in that old house forever. My hand froze on the wool. The old house. She meant my house. The house on Maple Ridge Road where Thomas had built the bookcases in the den by hand, where Michael had learned to ride his bike in the driveway, where I still kept Thomas's reading glasses beside his chair because moving them felt like losing him twice. Patricia murmured something I could not make out. Vanessa answered with a small laugh. It is too much space for one woman. And honestly, it should be ours eventually. Michael acts like bringing it up makes him a bad son. I stood perfectly still. The hallway smelled faintly of cinnamon candles and dish soap. In the dining room, Caleb was making a paper airplane from his place card. Grace was showing Michael her turkey drawing. Ordinary sounds. Family sounds. Underneath them, something colder had just opened. You have to be patient, Patricia said. Men do not like feeling pushed. I have been patient, Vanessa replied. But Eleanor is stubborn. She still thinks that house is some kind of shrine to Thomas. If she moved into one of those senior communities, everyone would be better off. Michael could stop worrying. The kids would have more room when we visit, and we could finally make practical plans. Practical plans. I almost smiled. There was always a clean phrase for an ugly intention. Downsizing. Simplifying. Helping. Protecting. Words polished smooth enough to hide the hand behind them. A cabinet closed, and I heard Vanessa lower her voice even more. I put her with the kids tonight to see how she handled it. She did not say a word. That tells me everything. For a moment, the house seemed to tilt. Not from shock. From confirmation. The humiliation had been a test. The paper plate had been a measuring tool. Vanessa was not only trying to embarrass me. She was checking how easily I could be moved. Out of the main table. Out of decisions. Out of my home. Out of the life Thomas and I had built one paycheck, one repair, one hard winter at a time. I looked down at my left hand. My wedding ring caught the light from the hallway lamp, a thin gold circle worn smooth after more than 40 years. Thomas had not been a loud man. He did not make grand speeches or dramatic promises. But after his diagnosis, when the house grew quiet in that careful way houses do around illness, he had taken my hand one evening and said, "Eleanor, do not let anyone make you feel like a guest in the life we built." I had thought he meant loneliness. I had thought he meant grief. I had not understood he was warning me about the living. Vanessa came out of the kitchen carrying a covered casserole dish. When she saw me standing there, her smile returned quickly, neat and bright. "Oh, Eleanor, I did not realize you were still here." "I was just getting my scarf," I said. My voice was steady. That seemed to disappoint her. "Well, drive carefully. It gets dark so early now." She held the dish toward me. "I packed you some leftovers. Mostly sides. I figured turkey might be a little heavy for you this late." I looked at the foil-covered container. Another offering wrapped like kindness. "Thank you," I said, taking it. Michael finally came over as I reached the front door. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, too softly, too late. I looked at his face and saw worry there, but not enough courage to stand on. "I am fine," I said. Outside, the November air was sharp against my cheeks. I walked to my car under a sky so clear it looked polished. The casserole dish sat on the passenger seat during the drive home, warm and unwanted. I did not cry. I did not turn on the radio. I drove past dark lawns, porch lights, and American flags moving gently in the cold wind. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the hurt had changed shape. It was no longer embarrassment. It was information. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, though I had barely slept. The house was still dark, except for the small lamp I kept burning in the kitchen since Thomas passed. It made a circle of yellow light over the table where we used to drink coffee together before the day found us. I set the leftover container Vanessa had given me on the counter and opened it. Inside were 2 spoonfuls of green bean casserole, a corner of stuffing, and 1 dry dinner roll wrapped in foil. No turkey. No pie. Nothing Grace or Caleb would have chosen for me. I looked at it for a long moment, then closed the lid and put it in the refrigerator, not because I wanted it, but because throwing it away felt too much like admitting it had hurt. At 8:30, Marjorie Ellis called. She had been my friend for 27 years, long enough to hear the weather in my voice before I said a word. "How was dinner?" she asked. I told her it was fine. There was a pause. "Eleanor." Just my name. That was all it took. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting across from her at Miller's Diner on Route 6, the same place where waitresses still called everyone honey and refilled coffee before the cup was empty. Marjorie wore her red wool coat, and no patience in her eyes. I described the table first, then the paper plate, then Grace asking why I did not have a real one. I kept my voice even. I made it sound almost amusing, like one of those uncomfortable holiday stories people tell later with a shrug. Marjorie did not laugh. She did not even smile. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and listened until I told her what I had overheard in the kitchen. When I repeated Vanessa's words about testing how I handled it, Marjorie set her mug down so carefully the spoon barely moved. "Eleanor," she said, "that was not rudeness. That was a rehearsal." The words settled between us. Rehearsal. I looked out the window at the parking lot, where a man in a denim jacket was scraping frost from his windshield with a credit card. "For what?" I asked, though I already knew. Marjorie leaned closer. "For moving you one step at a time. First away from the table, then away from decisions, then away from your house. People like Vanessa do not start with legal papers. They start by seeing who will object when they disrespect you in public." I stirred my coffee even though I had not added sugar. The spoon made small circles in the dark surface. "Michael would never force me out." Marjorie's face softened, which was worse than if she had argued. Maybe not with a loud voice. "But has he asked you about paperwork lately? Power of attorney? Medical forms? Bank access? Anything he called practical?" I remembered. Michael standing in my living room in September, rubbing the back of his neck, while Vanessa admired the fireplace. "Mom, it might be smart to have some documents in place," he had said, "just in case something happens. Vanessa knows a guy who can make it simple." I had brushed it off then. I thought he was worrying because Thomas was gone and I was alone. I had almost felt touched. Now the memory felt different, like finding a hairline crack in a glass I had been drinking from for months. "He mentioned it once," I said. Marjorie closed her eyes briefly. "Call Robert Hale. Thomas's lawyer." The name brought back the smell of polished wood, old files, and the black suit I wore the week after the funeral. Robert had handled everything with a gentleness I appreciated at the time, but barely absorbed. I had signed what he showed me, nodded when he explained, and gone home to sleep on Thomas's side of the bed because it still held the shape of him. "I do not want to make this bigger than it is," I said. Marjorie reached across the table and touched my wrist. "That is how women like us were trained, Eleanor. Make it smaller. Smooth it over. Do not embarrass anyone. Do not cause trouble." But trouble already came to dinner and gave you a paper plate. I looked at her hand over mine, both of us with thin skin and wedding rings that told different stories. Outside, the frost was melting from car windows. Inside, the waitress poured more coffee, and the ordinary morning kept moving as if something important had not just shifted inside me. By the time I left the diner, my hurt had not disappeared. It was sitting right there in my chest, familiar and heavy. But beside it was something new. Clarity. I sat in my car with the heater running and found Robert Hale's number in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the screen for only a second before I pressed call. Robert Hale's office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown, above a pharmacy that still had a hand-painted sign in the window. I had not been there since the week after Thomas's funeral, when the whole world had felt wrapped in cotton and every sentence sounded far away. This time, I noticed everything. The narrow staircase, the brass nameplate on his door, the faint smell of paper, coffee, and lemon furniture polish. His receptionist, Diane, stood when I walked in and said, "Mrs. Bennett, it is good to see you." There was kindness in her voice, but not pity. I appreciated that more than she knew. Robert came out a moment later, silver-haired, careful-eyed, wearing the same navy suit he seemed to have owned forever. "Eleanor," he said, taking both my hands. "Come in. What can I do for you?" I sat across from his desk with my purse in my lap and told him only what mattered. I did not dramatize it. I did not mention every look, every slight. Every holiday, I had been eased out of like an old chair no one wanted in the living room. I told him about the dinner, the children's table, the paper plate, the conversation I overheard about my house, and Michael's earlier mention of power of attorney. Robert listened without interrupting. That was one of his gifts. He let silence do its work. When I finished, he removed his glasses and set them on the desk. "Did you sign anything?" he asked. "No. Did Michael or Vanessa give you documents to review?" "Not yet." He nodded slowly, then turned to the filing cabinet behind him. "Then we are ahead of them." The word "them" landed softly but clearly. He pulled a thick folder from the drawer, the tab labeled Bennett, Thomas, and Eleanor. My throat tightened at the sight of our names together. Robert opened the folder and took out several documents, each marked with colored tabs. Thomas was very specific, he said. More specific than you may remember, given the circumstances at the time. I folded my hands tighter. I remember signing things. I do not remember much else. That is understandable. He slid the first page toward me. The Maple Ridge Road property transferred fully to you upon Thomas's passing. Not jointly with Michael. Not in trust for the family. To you, Eleanor. You are the sole owner. I stared at the words, legal and plain, and felt the floor return beneath my feet. Michael has no claim? No claim. No authority to sell, lease, borrow against, or manage the property unless you grant that authority in writing. And I would strongly advise that you do not sign anything without my review. I nodded, but my eyes had moved to Thomas's signature at the bottom. The familiar slant of it. The firm line under the last name. He had been protecting me while I was busy fearing life without him. Robert turned another page. There is also the Education Trust for Grace and Caleb. I looked up. The children. Yes. Thomas established it quietly. A substantial amount. Tuition, school expenses, future college costs. But the trustee is you. Not Michael. Not Vanessa. I sat back, stunned. Why would he do that? Robert's expression changed then, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. Because he worried. About Michael? Not exactly. He paused, choosing his words with the caution of a man who had carried someone else's secret for a long time. Thomas loved your son, but in his final year, he became concerned about Vanessa's influence. He felt Michael avoided conflict with her, even when he knew something was wrong. Thomas wanted to make sure you could not be pressured, and that the grandchildren's future could not be used as leverage. The room went very quiet. Outside the window, traffic moved along Main Street, tires hissing over damp pavement. Somewhere downstairs, the pharmacy door chimed. I looked at the folder and thought of Thomas sitting in this same office, already tired, already facing me and still thinking beyond himself. Still thinking of me. He never told me. I whispered. He said if he told you, you would spend your remaining time together worrying. He wanted you to live in the house as your home, not as a battlefield. My eyes burned, but I did not cry. Not there. Not yet. Robert handed me a clean set of copies and placed them in a blue folder. Keep these somewhere safe. I can also prepare a letter stating that all requests regarding your property or legal authority must come through this office. I ran my fingers over the folder's edge. It was not heavy, but it felt like a doorstop holding something open. So if Vanessa thinks I am alone, Robert met my eyes. Then she is mistaken. I thought of the paper plate bending under my dinner, of Vanessa watching too. See whether I would object, of Michael mistaking my quiet for weakness. For the first time since Thanksgiving night, I smiled without performing it for anyone. Robert, I said, I think it is time they understood what Thomas already knew. The blue folder from Robert Hale's office stayed on my passenger seat all the way home, catching the weak afternoon light each time I passed under a bare maple tree. I did not open it again that day. I did not need to. Knowing what was inside changed the shape of my house the moment I walked through the front door. Maple Ridge Road no longer felt like a place I was defending with memory alone. It was mine in ink, mine in law, mine because Thomas had loved me clearly enough to protect me after his voice was gone. For 3 days, I said nothing to Michael. I let the phone sit quiet on the kitchen counter. I watered the African violets in the breakfast nook. I folded laundry. I polished the framed photograph of Thomas standing beside the backyard grill one 4th of July, smiling with smoke in his eyes and Caleb as a baby in his arms. Ordinary things became steady things. Then, on Monday evening, Michael called. His voice sounded careful, the way it did when he wanted something but hoped I would offer it before he had to ask. Mom, Vanessa and I were thinking it might be good to have dinner this week. Just us. There are some things we should talk about. I looked at the clock above the stove. 6:15. Thomas had installed that clock after the old one stopped, saying a kitchen needed a heartbeat. What kind of things? I asked. Michael cleared his throat. Just future plans. Nothing bad. Vanessa found some really nice options we thought you might want to see. Options. Another clean word. All right, I said. Thursday. He sounded relieved too quickly. Great. Vanessa will cook. I almost told him I was not hungry, but I stopped myself. Some tables had to be approached twice. The second time, with open eyes. Thursday evening, I drove to their house with the blue folder in my purse. I wore charcoal slacks, a pale blue blouse, and the pearl earrings Thomas had given me on our 30th anniversary. Not fancy, not fragile. Prepared. Vanessa opened the door before I rang the bell, as if she had been watching through the front window. "Eleanor," she said warmly. "You look lovely." "Thank you." I stepped inside and noticed immediately that this was not a casual dinner. The dining table was set for 3. Real plates this time. White china, silver flatware, linen napkins. No children's table. No cartoon turkey. Grace and Caleb were nowhere in sight. "The kids are at my mother's," Vanessa said, answering the question I had not asked. "We thought this conversation should be adult." There it was again. Adult. Grown up. Words she used like velvet ropes. Michael stood near the fireplace, holding a glass of iced tea he had not touched. He kissed my cheek and smelled faintly of wintergreen gum. Nervous. Dinner was baked salmon, roasted asparagus, and wild rice, the kind of meal Vanessa served when she wanted the room to feel responsible. We spoke politely for 15 minutes. Weather. Church donations. A school fundraiser. I chewed slowly and watched the performance unfold. Vanessa waited until plates were half empty before she reached to the chair beside her and lifted a glossy folder. "Eleanor," she began, "I hope you know this comes from love." I set down my fork. That is usually an expensive sentence. Michael looked at me quickly. Vanessa's smile held, but barely. "We are worried about you living alone in that big house. It is a lot for someone your age. The stairs, the yard, maintenance, property taxes. Michael loses sleep over it." Michael looked at his plate. I turned to him. "Do you?" He rubbed his thumb along the edge of his napkin. "I worry, Mom. That is all." Vanessa opened the folder and spread several brochures across the table. Smiling older couples walking along paved garden paths. Bright apartments with beige sofas. Dining rooms with chandeliers that tried too hard. "This community is only 20 minutes away," she said. "They have activities, transportation, medical staff nearby. It would give everyone peace of mind." I looked at the brochure closest to me. A woman with silver hair was laughing over a salad, her hand frozen midair for the camera. "And my house?" I asked. Vanessa leaned back slightly, as if pleased I had stepped where she wanted. "Well, that is the practical part. If you sold it, you could use some of the money for your care, and Michael could help manage the rest. Or, if you wanted to keep it in the family, there are ways to transfer responsibility gradually." "Responsibility," I repeated. Michael finally spoke. "Mom, nobody is trying to take anything. It is just that the house is too much." I looked around the room. The same room where I had sat with a paper plate 1 week earlier. Vanessa had upgraded the dishes, but not the intention. "And who prepared the paperwork?" I asked. Vanessa blinked. "It is not paperwork yet. Just information. But there will be paperwork." Her fingers tightened on the brochure. "Eventually, yes. Only to make things easier." I reached into my purse and felt the edge of the blue folder. Not yet. I wanted to see whether Michael would find his voice before paper had to speak for me. "Michael," I said, "do you believe I am unable to make decisions for myself?" His face changed. Pain, discomfort, shame, all passing through quickly. "No, Mom. Of course not." Vanessa interrupted softly. "No one is saying unable. We are saying it is time to be realistic." I turned to her. "Realistic about what?" She held my gaze this time. "About the fact that you are alone now." The room became very still. There it was. The sentence beneath all the others. Not unsafe. Not overwhelmed. Alone. She thought loneliness had made me negotiable. I opened my purse, took out the blue folder, and placed it on the table beside her brochures. The sound it made was quiet, but Vanessa looked at it as if it had spoken her name. I did not push the folder toward Vanessa. I simply left it there between us, beside the glossy pictures of cheerful strangers walking through landscaped retirement gardens. For several seconds, no one touched anything. The candles on the table made small gold circles on the silverware. Michael stared at the blue folder as if it were a sealed door. Vanessa recovered first, because women like her often mistake quickness for control. "What is that?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "Clarity," I said. I opened the folder and removed the first document, then placed it neatly on top of her brochures. "This is the deed transfer Robert Hale prepared after Thomas passed. The house on Maple Ridge Road belongs solely to me." Michael's face went pale in a quiet, gradual way. Vanessa leaned forward. "No one said it did not. You said responsibility could be transferred gradually. I looked at her, then at Michael. Responsibility cannot be transferred from me unless I choose to give it away. And I am not choosing that. Michael swallowed. Mom, we were only trying to help. Were you? I asked softly. The question did more than accusation would have. He looked down. Vanessa reached for his hand under the table, but he did not take it. That was the first crack I saw in her evening. I placed the second paper on the table. This concerns Grace and Caleb's education trust. Thomas created it for their future. I am the trustee. No withdrawals, changes, or decisions can be made without my approval and Robert Hale's oversight. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Just a fraction. But I saw it. That document mattered to her more than the house for one brief second. And that told me something too. Michael finally looked at me. Dad did that. Yes. Quietly. Why did he not tell me? I held his gaze. Because your father loved you. And because he knew love does not always make a person wise. Vanessa sat back as if insulted on Michael's behalf. That is unfair. No, I said. What was unfair was seating your husband's mother at a folding table with a paper plate to see how much humiliation she would accept before you asked for her house. The room went completely still. Michael's eyes moved from me to Vanessa. Not confused anymore. Listening. Vanessa gave a small laugh, thin as tissue. Eleanor, that is dramatic. It was a crowded holiday dinner. I was trying to make everyone comfortable. There were 6 unused china plates on the sideboard. Her smile faded. I do not remember that. I do. I folded my hands on the table. I remember the plate. I remember Grace asking why I did not have a real one. I remember you calling the main table the grown-up table. I remember you telling your mother that you were testing how I handled it. Michael's head turned sharply. You said that. Vanessa's eyes flashed toward me, then back to him. She misunderstood. Did you say it? He asked. His voice was not loud. That made it stronger. Vanessa did not answer quickly enough. That silence did what my anger never could have done. It made room for the truth. I looked at my son, and for the first time in a long while, I did not see only the man who had failed me. I saw the boy I had raised standing somewhere inside him, ashamed and trying to find the door. Michael, I said, I raised you to recognize cruelty, not to sit beside it and call it family peace. His eyes lowered, and the grief on his face was not the kind a mother enjoys seeing. But some grief is necessary. Some shame arrives as medicine. Vanessa pushed her chair back slightly. I will not sit here and be accused of caring about this family. You cared about position, I said. You cared about control. You cared about seeing whether I would accept being moved from one table before you tried to move me from one home. She looked toward Michael, waiting for him to rescue her from the discomfort she had created. He did not. His hands were clasped in front of him, knuckles white against the linen napkin. I gathered the documents and slid them back into the blue folder, leaving Robert Hale's business card on top of Vanessa's brochures. From now on, any conversation about my property, my legal authority, or the children's trust goes through Robert. Not through dinner. Not through guilt. Not through suggestions wrapped in concern. I stood. My knees ached a little, but I was glad for it. Pain in the body is honest. Pain in the family wears perfume and smiles across the table. Michael stood too. Mom, please do not go yet. I looked at him carefully. I am not leaving because I am hurt, Michael. I am leaving because I finally understand the room. Vanessa said nothing. The white china plate sat between us, polished and useless. 1 week earlier, she had given me paper because she thought I had no weight left in this family. That night, I left her with paper of my own. For 10 days after that dinner, Michael did not come by. He called twice. I let both calls go to voicemail, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I had spent too many years answering before he had learned how to speak. The house on Maple Ridge Road grew quiet in the way I loved best. The furnace clicked on in the mornings. The mail slid through the front slot at noon. In the evenings, I turned on the porch light before sunset, just as Thomas always had, and made soup in the blue Dutch oven we bought the year Michael left for college. I was not lonely in those days. I was alone, and there is a difference. Loneliness makes you reach for any hand offered. Being alone teaches you to look closely at the hand. On the 11th afternoon, Michael knocked instead of using the key he still had from years ago. That told me something before I opened the door. He stood on the porch in a gray coat, holding nothing. No flowers. No bakery box. No peace offering chosen by Vanessa. Just himself, tired-eyed and uncertain. Mom, he said, May I come in? I stepped aside. He walked into the living room and looked around as if he had forgotten the house was not a thing to be claimed, but a place that remembered him. His kindergarten photo still sat on the mantel. Thomas's chair still faced the window. The quilt his grandmother made still hung over the back of the sofa. Michael sat on the edge of the armchair and rubbed his palms together. Vanessa and I have been arguing, he said. That is between you and your wife. He nodded. I know. I am not here to make you fix it. That was new. I waited. He looked at the floor for a long time. I should have said something at Thanksgiving. My hands were folded in my lap. I did not help him. I saw where she put you. I saw the plate. I knew it was wrong. And I told myself it was easier to get through dinner than make a scene. His voice caught, but he kept going. I have been telling myself that for years. Easier not to ask. Easier not to disagree. Easier to believe you were fine because you always acted fine. I thought of every mother who had ever made herself fine so her child could stay comfortable. I was not fine, I said. He nodded, eyes wet but steady. I know that now. The apology that followed was not perfect, but it was honest. He did not blame stress. He did not blame marriage. He did not tell me Vanessa meant well. He said he had been weak where he should have been loyal, quiet where he should have been clear, and afraid of conflict with the wrong person. That mattered. Not enough to erase the hurt, but enough to open a door I had not locked. Vanessa did not come with him. I did not ask why. Some absences are answers. Over the next few months, things changed slowly, which is the only way real things change. Michael began visiting with Grace and Caleb on Saturday afternoons. At first, he was careful in my house, asking before he opened cabinets, before he moved a chair, before he brought in groceries. I let him be careful. Careful was better than careless. Grace still ran straight to the kitchen and asked if we could make pecan pie. Caleb built towers with Thomas's old dominoes on the coffee table. Vanessa sent polite messages through Michael, then fewer messages, then none at all. I did not chase an apology from her. An apology begged from someone who enjoyed your silence is just another performance. The following Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner at Maple Ridge Road. I set the main table with Thomas's china, the good silver, and linen napkins pressed smooth. There were place cards for Michael, Grace, Caleb, Marjorie, Robert Hale, and two neighbors who had nowhere else to go. I placed Thomas's wedding ring beside a small candle near my plate. Not as sadness, as witness. Every chair at that table mattered, even the empty one. Before dinner, Grace helped me carry plates from the cabinet. She lifted one carefully and said, "Grandma, real plates are heavy." I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. They are supposed to be." During the meal, Michael looked at me from across the table, and this time he did not look away. No grand speech was made. No one needed one. The turkey was warm, the rolls were soft, and Caleb spilled a little cranberry sauce on the tablecloth. I dabbed it with a napkin and kept eating. Later, after everyone left and the house settled into its soft holiday quiet, I opened the bottom drawer of the hutch. Inside, wrapped in a clean kitchen towel, was the paper plate from that other dinner. I had taken it from the trash before I left that night, flattened and stained, too flimsy to hold a proper meal, but strong enough to hold a lesson. I did not keep it because I was bitter. I kept it because sometimes disrespect does not arrive shouting. Sometimes it comes smiling, dressed as concern, placed gently in front of you at a family table. And sometimes, that is all it takes for a woman to remember she was never the one who belonged at the small table.